As the day of Christmas rapidly approaches, we all tend to wait until the last minute to do our holiday shopping. Sometimes it's a result of just waiting for the proper funds to come in. But more times than not, it's because we just wait entirely too long. That's what I did last year around this time. And it taught me a lesson I'll never forget. It was about a week away until Christmas, and I had yet to buy anything from my boyfriend. They had an extremely stressful year, and I had every intention of spoiling him this year, but the time just slipped away. More than anything in the world, he wanted to PlayStation 5. And he jokingly said that's what he wanted. He didn't expect me to get that for him due to the steep price tag at the time and the near impossible availability of the merchandise. But like I said, this year, I really wanted to do something special for him. So I have to say, I'm not a gamer. And I don't know anything about that world other than whatever I see him playing. So I didn't really understand just how hard it would be to get my hands on a PlayStation 5. That week, I went to every single store and called every store within 50 miles, nobody had a PS5. And that's what I get for waiting until the last second. I was determined to get my hands on the PlayStation no matter what those so. So I did what everyone does, and looked online for anybody selling a PS5. And I found dozens of hits, and then almost threw up at how much people were asking for a video game system. I was in utter shock that people spent that much on video games. But like I said, I know nothing about that world. I remember going to work that night and asking some of my co-workers who play video games if that was normal, and they confirmed that if I desperately wanted a PS5, that I was going to have to spend way more money than the asking price. That night, I narrowed down my search to the 3 cheapest prices to the ads were well over an hour from my house, and the most expensive of the 3 were only about 20 minutes away. I decided to text the number and see if the machine was still available. And if it was, I was gonna get it for him. The guy's name was Alan, and he wanted all inquiries to text him to the number he provided, which I did. We chatted for a bit. And he seemed like a pretty alright guy, other than the fact that he was hoarding and selling PlayStations at a jacked up price. We agreed on a time to meet up at 9 p.m. that Monday. I was not crazy about that time. But he said he could only do nights because of his job. He seemed a little sketchy like anything on the internet. But I needed that PlayStation. So he's going to make this happen no matter what. Monday night comes, and I certainly wasn't going to meet this Alan fellow by myself. I called my friend Rita, who agreed to come with me. Rita's a tough chick who I wouldn't mess with. In fact, I don't know very many human beings who would mess with Rita. Not only is Rita beautiful, but she's built like a goddess. She does professional weightlifting. And she's way over 6 feet tall. So just on the off chance that this deal ended up being something horrible, Rita would be there to regulate. The drive out to Alan's address was terrible. Of course, the snow started to come down hard when we were going to an area in the dark that we're unfamiliar with. A little over 20 minutes later, we pulled up to the address provided by Alan. The house was a beat-up looking shack. If not for the big red pickup truck outside, it would say that this place is certainly abandoned. I texted Alan that I was outside and questioned if this was the correct address. He said it was, and to just come right in. Rita said if I go inside, that she'd have to beat me up just for being that dumb. So I asked if he could come outside, and he responded that he had broken his leg and he was not able to move. Hence, while the lights were off, I looked at Reed and said I have to at least check this out. He could be telling the truth. Rita looked at me like I was insane. And I think I was a little nuts. Where you said, girl, this is clearly a setup. Get you man something else, it's not worth getting robbed, or worse. I thought for a second, then looked at Rita and smiled, and I said, well, that's why you're here, love. So don't get robbed, or worse. Just writing this. I feel sick about how horrible of a friend I am. I literally put myself and my best friend in danger for my own selfish needs. Anyway, read aside and agreed to come to the door with me. But she insisted on leading the way. Read before we were about to get out of the car, Hanlon texted me again said, "Are you coming or what?" As we got out of the car and started to approach the beat-up house, I was typing and sending a message just saying that we were walking to the door now. Well, good thing I sent that text. Because right after I pushed send, we were walking by the red truck and I heard a buzz as we passed. Read it and I both looked at each other because that sounded like a phone vibrating, right as Alan would have received my message. For the question to us was, why would he be in that truck? I received another message from Alan. And this time the message said, "I thought you were coming alone." I read the message out loud for Rita, who basically at this point was about to carry me back to the car. That message was my breaking point. And I didn't like any of this. So I decided to just get in the car and leave. At that exact moment, the red truck turned on and peeled out of the driveway, nearly hitting Rita, who drove out of the way. Rita was laying on the ground holding her arm in pain, and the red truck turned around, now heading back toward me in the driveway. I ran over to Rita to try to help her. She was slow to get to her feet. And when the driver of the truck was only a few feet away, he stopped and got out of the truck. It was a short man. When he looked like he was very much, he literally built. He ran at me, grabbing my arm and tugged me toward the truck. I tried to fight him off. But he was incredibly strong for being that small. Thank God for Rita though. This one of the con woman got up, ran at the guy and shoulder checked him. He let go of me, got back in the truck and just peeled off once again. We helped each other off, got in our car and sped off in the opposite direction of this truck. We took every zigzag that we could to find our way home. As we got back to Rita's house, we called the police and made an official statement. I gave the cop all the information I could, but of course, like all these scam artists, none of this information given by Alan was real. Neither Rita nor I got a good look at the license plate, and honestly, through the darkness, the snow, and all the chaos, I couldn't even tell you for sure which brand truck it even was. I thought it was a Chevy, and Rita thought it was a Ford. All I know for sure is that Alan had a red pickup truck. The number was a burner phone, or whatever those things are called. And his profile was of course fake and deleted. The cops did everything they could, and they tried to be more helpful. But unfortunately, we just didn't have very much information to go on. I owe everything I have to Rita for saving me that night. I told my boyfriend the story after Christmas, and he nearly lost his mind. Rita ended up breaking our arm when she dove out of the way. And that made the injury even worse when she showed her check the guy. I felt so horrible. I even offered to help Rita pay her hospital bill, but she refused to let me. I will never wait until the last minute to do my holiday shopping ever again. And if I can't find what I'm looking for at the store or online, but I'll find something else. Many people like myself dread the idea of shopping around the holidays. Up until just a few years ago, I loved it. But an unfortunate events made me change my mind instantly. I used to like to think of myself as a professional shopper, in the sense that I've always been up to date with the latest sales, where to get them and when is the best time to strike. Shopping at one time in my life was more than an obligation, and in fact was a hobby. Well, several years ago, my friend Carissa and I were planning our route. Like I said, I knew the best deals and when to strike, so I mapped out the best course for us to maximize our holiday shopping. The first mistake I made was shopping on a Saturday. The store we went to was filled to the brim with people. It looked like chaos inside the giant department store, with people literally running around. Carissa doesn't do well with rowdy crowds like this, so she was anxious as can be. I like to move fast in these situations. But because of her anxiety, I was moving a lot slower than I liked to. The one thing I needed to get more than anything else here at the store was a video game from my brother. And I knew that this set game was going to be a hot commodity. I could have gone to a dozen other stores, but this store was selling the game for $15 cheaper than everywhere else. Once Carissa finally started to calm down a bit, I made a dash for the electronics department. And to my surprise and joy, the game was still on the shelf. As I grabbed the game, another woman came over and tried to grab the game out of my hands. I pulled away with some force and yelled, "Hey, what were you doing?" I turned and started to walk away, and the woman started to shout at me. "That was my game. You took it from me." I just waved her off and kept walking as I shook my head in disbelief. I clearly grabbed the game first. Once I got back to my cart, I started to speak with Carissa, when out of nowhere, the same crazy woman pushed me over my card. She pushed me with my back turned, and I fell into the ground. I got to my feet and tried to process what was happening. And before I could even remotely contemplate what was happening, this woman grabbed my hair and started to pull it. I kicked her off of me and proceeded to lash out on her with a verbal lashing of some choice words that I won't put on here. But let this be a lesson to all: violence of any kind does not pay off, because security not only escorted this deranged woman out of the store, but I also got kicked out of the store as well. They didn't care about my side or her side of the story. They didn't want to deal with any trouble. So basically, we just got thrown out with a threat of legal action if we remained on the property. So after all of that, neither of us got the game, or any of the other items I had in my cart already. I cooled off after a while, and Carissa and I got all of our shopping done elsewhere. I even found the game I was looking for. It was a little more money, but I still got it nonetheless. I wish I could say that this is where my story ends, though. But of course, this nightmare was only just the start for me. When we finished shopping, we decided to go get a drink at one of the bars located right in the same plazas as the other stores we went shopping at. We both just ordered the cheap beer and were planning on only having one drink. One drink turned into two drinks, of course, because we had a lot to talk about. As we got ready to cash out, a man came and stood right behind her stools. I could tell Carissa was visibly uncomfortable. It's a bar, and sometimes people are oblivious to their surroundings. So I didn't care too much. But to make her feel better, I said something to the man. "Hey, I'm sorry. We're getting ready to leave in a minute. Do you think you could maybe back up a little so we can get out?" The man said nothing and just stared at me. "Can I help you, dude?" The man took a step closer and still said nothing. He was inches from the stall now. So close that I wouldn't be able to move the stall out even if I wanted to. This is probably the longest, most awkward 20 seconds of my life with no talking. And finally the man said in a slow and raspy voice, "What's wrong with you?" I was amazed at that question. I'm sure I made a face of disgust, which probably made him angrier. But at that moment, I had no idea who this guy was or what he wanted. Before I could ever say anything, the man spoke up again and said that was my game. He took it and now I don't have it. I started to laugh. In my head, I figured I was playing with fire. But I was so annoyed at this point that I didn't care. "Look, dude, I got kicked out of the store to your girlfriend or whatever she has attacked me. If she's lucky, I don't press charges back up and let us leave." The man slowly backed away and we grabbed our stuff and left. We walked away from the bar and made our way to the door, and I turned around just to make sure this guy wasn't following us. He was an ugly man. He was probably only in his early 30s, but looked horrible. He smelled like old dirty socks and had these nasty buck yellow teeth. When I turned around, he was still standing by that bar stool. As we got outside, I heard Carissa gasp and she clenched her mouth. "What is it?" I said nervously. Carissa didn't even need to respond. I saw why she gasped right away. The woman from the store was standing next to my car. She was holding a bat or some type of blunt object in her hand. I wasn't about to say anything this time because it seemed like my mouth kept getting me in trouble. I tried to go back inside the barn. The man was standing right on the other side of the glass door. I tried to remain as calm as possible, especially since Carissa was completely unglued at this point. My logic was telling me that we were only in minor danger. It was still only around 8 p.m. currently, and there were a ton of people and witnesses all around. I grabbed Chris's arm and said in a calm voice, "Just breathe and try to relax. I'm going to grab my phone and call the police." I slowly reach for my phone. And the woman started the dash at me again, just as she did inside the store. I like to call it a holiday miracle, but the impossible happened next. A group of 6 people came outside the bar, stepped in front of us, and basically shielded us. I assumed that they were 3 couples, as they must have witnessed everything that went down in the barn outside. The one bigger guy from the group looked at the woman, said, "You don't want to do this, is walk away." The woman passing the tracks. She looked like she was going to charge at us again. But she lowered her head and just ran away. Seconds after that, the man from inside the bar charged through the door and ran in the same direction as the woman. My thought was correct. The bigger guy who confronted the woman, his girlfriend, was the one who quite honestly saved her life. She was outside the bar smoking a cigarette, and she heard the guy and the woman talking about luring the 2 girls out. And then taking care of business, whatever that means. The woman from the bar thought it sounded suspicious, obviously. So she told her boyfriend about the conversation. Not 5 minutes after that, she said, is when she saw the little man standing right behind us at the bar stools. At that moment, the girl, her boyfriend, and the entire party watched the entire situation unfold. And I'm so thankful that they did. There really are some good people out there. I understand that there is so much more I could have done in that situation. I didn't handle it correctly at all. I guess that may just be a result of me being in my early 20s at the time, and honestly, I just didn't really want to extend this horrible interaction any longer. I did contact the location manager of the entire plaza to let them know about these 2 creeps, but they really didn't seem to care too much. At least it didn't seem like they cared. They said something along the lines of they get hundreds of complaints every day or something like that. I have yet to visit that plaza since that horrible December night. The only positive that came from that night is that I now have a wild story I can share with new friends this time of year. And I gained 6 new Facebook friends that I'm still in contact with today. So many people that I know personally really hate the Christmas shopping season. To them, it's more like a nuisance to shop for loved ones, as if they're only doing it out of some sort of requirement. Me, on the other hand, I love this time of year so much in fact that I went and got a job at Kohl's part-time just to assist with all the holiday shopping, and I love retail and customer service, which I realized makes me sound actually insane. But I do love it. I only work maybe 10 hours a week just as a cashier. They really liked me there and constantly offered me more hours, but I didn't want to sacrifice my main job for slightly more than minimum wage. Like I said, this was just a part-time job because I love helping people during the holiday season. I was always so cheerful and bubbly to the customers. I tried to have my temperament come off as infectious as they tried to spread holiday cheer to every customer who came through my line. During my time as a cashier, I had every type of customer you can imagine. Great ones, bad ones, and everything in between. But one customer specifically, I have to put in his own category. He wasn't just bad. He was terrifying and traumatizing. My evening started like every other evening I worked. There was around 5 p.m. and only a week until Christmas. So the people were getting crazy. Toward the end of my shift, and the peculiar-looking man came through my line. He was tall, like really tall. Now I'm only 5'3". And this guy seemed to be way over a foot taller than me. He had a long brown beard that went down to his chest. His hair was very long and wild and went in every direction possible. But it was still rocking a bald patch right in the top center of his head. He was an average-built guy. And if I had to guess, I would say in his late 40s. His clothes were more shocking than his appearance. And he had a lime green coat that was zipped up to the top. Across the back of the coat was the phrase "Santa's helper." He was wearing aviator-style glasses, but they had no lenses in them. It was just the frames. He had 2 front teeth, and that seemed like all of his teeth, at least that I could see. I don't know what you would call his pants. They were like pants that you'd see in an old American movie or play, like something George Washington would wear. And he had the high stocking to go with the pants. I know they have a name, but I can't remember what they're called. Sorry. I know that was a long and overly descriptive explanation, but I really want you to be able to visualize this weirdo. When he finally got ready to cash out, he was literally buying one throw pillow that you put on a love seat or a small sofa. It was a pillow with Sanaa's face on it. A creepy Santa, not a cute cartoony one, and greeted the man and went through my entire cold speech at the register. When I was done speaking, the man just stared at me with this blank and almost expressionless eyes. After a moment of awkwardness, he finally said, "You're perfect. You know that?" Not the weirdest thing anybody has ever said to me. But coming from him, it was a bit alarming. I just smiled and said thank you. I cashed him out quickly and gave him his receipt and said my chipper voice, "And have a nice day." And I smiled at the man. He didn't walk away for a few seconds and continued to stare at me. I finally just turned to the next customer, who forcibly threw all their stuff on the counter for me to cash out. When this happened, the man barely broke his concentration on me and slowly started to walk away as he kept me in his sights the entire time. I finally decided to just ignore him and go on with my shift. Before long, it was so busy that I'd forgotten about the strange man. He wasn't in the store anymore. And I have to say, I did feel a strange sense of relief. I figured the guy was just a little strange and I didn't want to hold it against them. That night when I left, I had one of my co-workers walked me to my car, and just because I felt it in my bones that this guy was some type of loose cannon. Again, I felt relieved when I got to my car and saw that I had no giant man waiting for me. But that night when I got home, I told my husband all about the man and how creepy and weird the interaction was. My husband laughed because he thought it was just funny. And in that moment, I kind of chuckled too. Before bed that night, as my husband and I were getting ready for her to knock on the door, we both looked at each other in confusion and with a bit of fear. "Who the heck is the person at the door?" we thought my husband shouted. "Oh, is it?" instead of a verbal response. The person at the door responded with another knock. Then followed that knock with 3 more knocks, all about a second apart. We approached the door together and looked down at the living room window where we could see who was at the door. I kid you not. It was the man from my line earlier. My husband looked at me and said, "Is that the guy you were telling me about? As you know where you live?" I couldn't even speak. I just stood there frozen. My husband approached the door and yelled from our side, "Hey, listen, if you leave now, I won't call the police." I was watching the man through the living room window during this interaction. After my husband said that, the man took his hand off the door and just stood in front of the door. I mean, legitimately just standing in front of the door. It looked like his nose was touching the door from my vantage point. And the man didn't respond. My husband said, "All right, then, police it is." After you said that, the man started to bang on the door harder and harder. My husband stood there holding the door as he called the police, and even though I don't think this man could have broken through the locks, finally I yelled, "What do you want?" And the man stopped knocking again. He turned to look at me through the living room window. "Did you mean that? What you said earlier?" I looked at the man, said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." The man walked toward the window, now standing right in front of it. "You told me to have a nice day. Did you mean it?" I didn't answer him. I probably should have, because now he started to bang on the window and he yelled, "Did you mean it?" I just started to scream. My husband stood in front of me and basically stood on the other side of the window waiting for the police to show up. The man grabbed a rock from the front of the house. He threw it, using it to break the window. As the glass shattered, my husband ran at the man and kicked him as he tried to climb through the window. He fell back, and as he got back up to approach the window, the cops were pulling up to the house. Two police officers ran up to the man as he's still trying to climb inside. Even though the cops grabbed him and pulled them back. As the cops are trying to apprehend the man, he said again in a loud voice, "Did you mean to hit?" The cops pulled him away and put them in the back of the squad car. My husband talked to the cops and I just sat there trying to process the insanity of the events that just happened. Clearly, the man was arrested and charged, and as far as I know, he's still in custody. As of currently. The scariest part of this entire story is the next morning when we went outside to assess all the damage. The Santa's pillow was right outside the window and had a note on it to attach to the back of the pill that said, "Have a nice day." Click the join button to become a member today for exclusive content.